I'll break it down into a couple of Syria, Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of illegal ivory in the world.
Live in a third world nation where your votes will get stolen if you can vote there at all.
Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. So that was an interesting interview with Asher Westrup Evans to talk about the what's happening in the Middle East and in Gaza. It's constantly changing, and the world is constantly changing, and there's conflict everywhere. So, which is why I'm very honored to have with us today Yuriy Bodenchuk, who former Ukrainian diplomat, joining us from Ukraine. Welcome, Yuriy. How are you today?
Hello, Dane. Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
So, Yuriy, as we all know, there's this meeting scheduled between Trump and Putin for Friday in Alaska, of all places. I was talking to a friend of mine last night, thinking that maybe Trump's going to sell Alaska back to Russia. Maybe that's what's going to happen. Who knows? But putting that aside for a second, I first want to get a kind of a feeling about what the Ukrainian people are feeling about what's going on with Trump, European Union, Putin, and all these discussions. Kind of give us a feeling about what people are feeling on the ground there in Ukraine.
You know, Dane, this summit in Alaska this Friday is, of course, the hot topic here in Ukraine right now. It's in all the social media, in all the news. And I won't be honest with you if I say that there is no anxiety and uncertainty among Ukrainians in the run-up to this meeting. So, but still, despite all the statements from the American side, from the European Union, any of them, they cannot deny the basic truth about this war. We are on our Ukrainian soil, and we were not those who started this war, and we were not those who came to conquer a neighboring peaceful country. And therefore, it's logical that it's quite difficult to find this balance in terms of what Ukrainians might be happy with as a result of this meeting, especially taking into account that mostly the discussion is around the concessions which will have to be made. Because majority of Ukrainians will perceive any concessions in favor of the aggressor as an act of appeasement. And from this, stemming from this point, some commentators in Ukraine, I'm not one of them. I don't think we have to be too pessimistic at this point, but some already compare potential outcomes of this meeting with the so-called Munich betrayal. And so this can give you a feeling of current mood. It's a very mixed feelings, but as the time passes by, I also start getting some more or less optimistic views that still it can work somehow. We can work it out because if you allow me, we find ourselves at this point because the decision about the need of Putin's defeat has never been taken by the West until now. And that in itself is unfair. So we are looking for fair peace, for just peace, but there is no fair decision that the aggressor should be punished. And to put it in simple words, it looks like Putin is waging a war against Europe since against Ukraine, it's since 2014, and against Europe, it's basically since 2008, because last week we had the anniversary of Russian intervention into Georgia. And since then, other regimes like China, Iran, North Korea, and India provide him with a basis to continue to carry on with this war and to finance this war. And the good guys around the world can do nothing with this for decades. So the final thing I will say to this question is that I think that this should not be a question if Ukraine is able to defeat Russia. It should be a question if the Western world wants to stand up to him, defend common values, and win.
Yeah, well, there's so much to unpack there. I mean, let's just take it in little pieces here. I mean, people, excuse me, I got a bit of a cold. You know, we talk about, I mean, let's talk about Donald Trump's motivations, in my opinion. Donald Trump's motivations, and this is what the vice president, you know, J.D. Vance was talking about here in Europe when he was visiting the European, you know, by the way, for a guy who is really anti-Europe, he spends, you know, he's spending his vacation in Europe, which I thought was kind of funny. But that being said, the whole discussion is that there will be a land swap. You know, people are going to have to give up land. The Ukrainians are going to have to give up land. You know, I just read, you know, the statement from European leaders, basically the UK, the European Union, Finland, Germany, France, you know, where they're talking about, hey, they're optimistic about a discussion between Putin and Trump, but however, what's important to me, however, it's important that Ukraine maintains its territorial integrity. But let's just deal with the reality of this. How on earth can the war end without Ukraine having to give up some land? How do you see that happening?
I think it's the most complicated thing how to find this proper balance. And so I want to be optimistic and realistic at the same time. And it's very hard in this situation. But I think that if the war ends with any concessions to Russia, well, if Russia goes unchecked in general, if it's allowed to save its face, you know, then we cannot, we are not going to be in a position to speak about the end of the war. It will be only a temporary pause. It can last for 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, but it for sure will lead to a next global conflict because if Russia manages to go unchecked, it will not be a fair decision, and it will create a precedent that will lead to a global conflict. So I don't have a response to how we can get all our lands back practically at this point. But I understand that such solution will challenge the basic post-World War II principles that borders cannot be redefined through force. And it will justify that war is an acceptable behavior in the modern world, and that it can actually bring you to the desired result. So if there is no just peace, if there is no fair settlement, if Russia does not pay for the crimes against Europe, against Ukraine, against every Ukrainian mother, against territorial integrity and in the international law, all kinds of crimes they have committed, then there's going to be a big conflict in future, and Ukraine will be on the side of good in this conflict, and we will be the bearers of unique experience. But the most important thing now, I think, still is that Ukraine is going to continue to exist, and you mentioned this statement by the European Union leaders. One of the important elements, which has always been important since all the revolutions which happened in Ukraine, that Ukrainian people must have their right to freely choose their future. That's basically what this war is about. Territories, you know, I'm here speaking on my own behalf, and it's my personal point of view, but territories are still secondary compared to the right of the people to freely decide on their future.
Well, it's interesting because when you talk about freely decide, I mean, many people have argued that if there is a peace deal, which is reached, or a ceasefire, peace deal, however you want to call it, and part of that is giving up land. I mean, I know President Zelensky has talked about constitutionally, that they can't give up land. But I mean, if they can put it to a referendum and let the people decide, I mean, they say, listen, are you okay with giving up part of the land? But let's go back to a very practical thing. And listen, you are one of the most optimistic people in the world I know, yeah, and I love that about you. Go ahead. Yes.
Can I say one thing? I think there is a big difference between giving up land legally and practically. So I think it's an absolutely red line, and it's also important for the whole world order, for the world not to agree, and for Ukraine not to agree to any legal recognition of the occupied territories as Russian. There are other options like frozen conflicts or de facto control over the occupied territories. This can all be elaborated, but I think it's an absolutely red line to agree to make this legal recognition, because otherwise it will be a victory for aggressor.
Well, it will be a victory for aggressor, but still with a very practical reality. I mean, I've been to Ukraine. You live there. This war's been going on for 3 years. And one thing I want to point out to the viewers is that, this really is a war between Europe, not just Ukraine. Ukraine is part of Europe. This is a European war against an aggressor and I wouldn't just say just Russia. I mean, it's against Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, because all four of them are working to support Russia. All of them are in bed together working on this war. So, I mean, let's make sure who all the players are. It's Europe and the rest of the free world against Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, and all their little, and Belarus, and all those little satellite countries around. So it is a global conflict already, but the reality is, also what I want the viewers to understand, is that many people talk about peace, 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 and you talk about fair peace, just peace. You know what? Peace and capitulation are two different things. And as soon as you give up territorial, as soon as you give up land taken by force, then the rest of the world and the bad actors in the world are going to start doing the same thing. So this is what people around the world, in Nigeria and in all of Africa and the rest of the world, need to understand, that the precedent that would be set in this conflict is a global that will lead us to World War III if it isn't resolved peacefully. But anyway, I'm speaking a lot, but let me just go back to this. You have Zelensky saying, under no circumstances are we giving up land. You have Putin saying, under no circumstances are we going to end this war unless we take land. Okay. So Trump and Putin are going to meet. Trump will say, okay, great, it's okay, take your land. And maybe America says, we're going to recognize, what Russians have taken. But the reality is, this war has been going on for 3 years. How do you rectify? I mean, this is what I can't wrap my head around. How do you get to a point where you reach peace, where both sides are very strong? I mean, forget about prosecuting, about war crimes, all that kind of stuff. That stuff would come. But the core issue, which I don't think is solvable, one side wants to keep the land, one side wants to take the land. How do you bridge that gap? And let me ask this question. At the end of the day, if Zelensky decided, forget the legality for a second, but if he were to suddenly say, okay, we're going to give up the Donbass, we're going to give up Crimea, and that means that this war will come to an end, would Ukrainians agree to that?
Hard to say, Dane. You're asking, as always, you're asking the most difficult questions, because you know the answers to all the easy ones. So I wouldn't like to go into very deep analysis of possible negative scenarios. I think that we should go step by step. And now, from the situation of Tuesday morning, I think that most important thing now is to provide that the path to peace should decide it together with Ukraine and Europe. That Ukraine and Europe are on board of this peace process. That we have to understand that now we are talking not about a pause in fighting or a ceasefire, but that the world needs a sustainable, lasting, and fair peace. And third thing, that we need viable security guarantees to understand, to prevent this war from repeating. And that those security guarantees are not dependent on electoral cycles in the democratic states who are Ukraine's allies, because that's what Putin counts on. He wants to bring about the change of authorities and to divide the Western bloc. So, and then when we all agree that these are our goals, then from this perspective, we're going to be looking at the ways what's possible and what is not possible.
Well, listen, I'm reading a note like this is the reality. You're right. I don't know. Well, first of all, I don't know the answers to all the easy questions. But one thing I do know, and I will stake my life on this: Vladimir Putin will not agree and abide by any peace deal whatsoever. Will not under any scenario. And you mentioned the Munich agreement back in pre-World War II, with British Prime Minister Chamberlain went and met with Hitler and said, okay, we will not enter. We will say, okay, for you invading, European countries, if you promise not to go any further. And Hitler said, okay, great, I won't do any more. Hitler and Putin, I'm putting those two in the same sentence on purpose. Hitler and Putin are like spawns of the same family. They really are, okay? Because he's not going to agree to anything either. So if there's a ceasefire and he gets some land, I mean, he is set on restoring the former Soviet Union. That's just the reality. And he's going to take more land. He's going to take Moldova. He's going to take Georgia. He's not going to stop. So for those people in the world who think that, okay, let's have peace, it's all going to be fine. No. Mark my word, Vladimir Putin has never, ever agreed and honored any agreement since he's been in power, ever.
Absolutely. But allow me 30 seconds. And this
Yes.
is why I still want to remain optimistic. First of all, we agree with you that there's going to be another global conflict if this war is not settled in a fair way. So here we agree. And I still believe that the Americans have all the leverage to bring peace through strength and make Russia accountable and force it to end the war. And I also know that Americans are strong enough to be able to withstand Putin's attempts to deceive the American side. So yes, the ultimate goal is to make Russia end the war, but not to make Ukraine capitulate. And if the bad scenario that you were mentioning happens, it's not only like Ukraine or Nigeria understand the bad aftermath, but all the European Union leaders will also, they do understand already. So it's not only about post-Soviet bloc, it's about Germany, Poland, Scandinavian countries, because the intelligence services of those countries already warning their governments that in 3 to 5 years, it's absolutely a clear perspective that there's going to be Russian aggression.
No, I agree, and I was just in Estonia, and this is exactly what was discussed. I mean, people understand it, they know it, but the European Union, I mean, the best way to do it to me is to put boots on the ground, planes in the air, and ships in the sea, and fight the war now, because we're going to end up in World War III. Listen, Yuriy, we're out of time. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. I know I had you on longer than I had hooked you into, but it's excellent to see you as always. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye.
So let's just go to the studio real quick and banter about some odds and ends about our discussion. So where is that lovely lady? There she is. How are you?
Very well, Dane. Very good interviews. I had to listen to both of them all the way through, as I always did. Very interesting to see times really unfolding on two sides of the world. That's the Middle East as well as Europe as we speak. Honestly, I am one of those people looking forward to what Friday will look like. If indeed, according to the White House, President Trump is open to a trilateral talk, which involved Ukraine, with him discussing with Putin, which is already confirmed. It's very interesting for the world to see this really. And more than anything also, I guess the world is very impressed with the way and manner the European leaders are standing behind Ukraine at this point in time to help it really see it being able to speak in its own case, I mean, it's unbelievable that the way international relations plays out sometimes, that world powers really could talk about you, your country, your people, millions of people, without you really being there. But let's see, I don't know what you're hearing, if it would be possible really for President Zelensky to be a part of that discussion on Friday, and if not, what impact that will have on the path to peace in Ukraine.
Well, listen, President Zelensky, as I was just talking about, I mean, he's made it very clear that any giving up of any Ukrainian land is a non-starter. And so, trilateral. Well, first of all, let me be very clear. You're correct that you can't have a discussion about peace with Ukraine without the president of Ukraine there. You just can't, and it's just wrong. And I think that Trump is eyeing the Nobel Peace Prize, and that's what he wants to bring peace. But he also did say, to his credit, that he can only facilitate discussions, but at the end of the day, it's going to have to be agreements between Zelensky and Putin. I'll be very clear, I am not optimistic about what's going to come of any peace deal. I just don't see how you can bridge this divide between, Russia wanting land and Ukraine not giving up land. I think that eventually we're going to end up in a global conflict because both sides are entrenched, and I just don't see anything changing. But it's progress.
Absolutely.
But I would love to see more happen physically with the European Union other than just words. So.
Also, and I think that President Trump will make a whole lot of history if he's able to get back some territories for Ukraine, because he says this is also on the table when he meets with Putin on Friday. In all of these, we do all eyes on President Trump as well as Putin, the European leaders, and Zelensky also. Thank you indeed for having me on your show. I know, Dane, I don't know about you, many people are concerned, or they're paying, particular attention to the fact that more countries are coming out to stand for Palestine at this point in time. They are saying, look, in September, for instance, France and some nations, Australia here has also, has joined in the pack of countries that are willing to give their statehood vote to Palestine moving forward. I don't know what that will mean for Israel, because even UK says sometime next year, it might also vote in favor of Palestine. So I don't know how that will play out as we wrap up.
Well, listen, there's no way. I just don't see any scenario in which the current Israeli government and the Prime Minister Netanyahu agrees to a Palestinian state. I mean, he has made it very clear that the two-state solution, even though Asher was not as vocal about it, but I just don't see a Palestinian state happening. But listen, I applaud what the UK government has done and the French government has done, talking about a Palestinian state. The reality is, for there to be peace, there needs to be a Palestinian state. That's just because the Palestinian people, just like any people, they want their homeland. They deserve freedom. And this is not. I'm not talking about Hamas. I'm not talking about Hezbollah. I'm not talking about any. I'm talking about the Palestinian people. They've been promised a homeland, and they deserve a homeland. And until that happens, I just don't see there being peace in the Middle East. So. It's once again, if you look at Ukraine and you look at what's happening in the Middle East, these are two of the most difficult scenarios, difficult issues taking place the world has ever seen. And if we can solve these two, then I think the world is in a better place. But I think that there'll be catalysts for greater war and conflict. Sorry about this. Sorry to say that, but that's just the way I see it. So, thank you for being on the show today, by the way.
Thanks for having me. Thank you indeed.
Around
the World, Dane Waters returns next Tuesday, 9 o'clock. That's West African time. And we do hope they join Dane. And you can watch all the interviews right there on Silverbird Television, on Silverbird TV, on your YouTube, and across our social media platforms. We have clips for you that will lead you to watching the full interviews all around. That's the show today. On behalf of the team, I'm Seun Oyediji, wishing you a beautiful Tuesday.